Hello, it's Sunday, the 25th of April, 2021, and it's 9 o'clock at night, which means somewhere in the world, not only is a crime being committed, but somebody somewhere is watching Line of Duty. I, of course, am not. I don't find a huge interest in watching a huge number of police shows. There seems to be more police shows on British television than there are actually policemen and women. And almost all of them seem to implicate that every policeman is somehow a bent or crooked copper who's somehow on the take, deeply conflicted, struggling with alcoholism, drug addiction, or some other kind of deeply interesting personal characteristic. And of course, also in a 20-part series, trying to jam a half-hour story into 16 hours. And so, therefore, I don't watch a huge amount of cop television. And so therefore I spend my time instead talking to my mobile phone about things that I love. And what I'm aware of is also that I don't necessarily want to always be talking about the same stuff. Now, obviously, talking about the same stuff means I end up talking about Pet Shop Boys, New Order, Depeche Mode, U2, The Cure, bands that I like, film directors, and occasionally showing you my cat. And instead, I'm going to take a slightly different angle today. Today, I'm going to talk about bands that I love that I just don't think gets enough recognition and has been forgotten somewhat in history. There are a lot of bands that, when you look back through various TV programs about what it was like to be there in the 80s or the 90s or the noughties or the 10s or whatever the 20s are called, you find bands that were absolutely huge that nobody seems to talk about anymore. You know, bands that I loved that were really, really popular in the 90s. Bands like, The Wonder Stuff and The Wedding Present were pretty big. Poply itself, Ned's Atomic Dustbin, bands that sold over 1 million LPs, and nobody ever talks about them anymore. And they're not cool. When people come back to talking about the 90s, they always talk about how the Happy Mondays were brilliant, although really they were just a bunch of very, very lucky criminals. I don't want to say that in too negative a way, but the band were not anywhere near. The Happy Mondays were nowhere near as good as everybody made out. The Stone Roses, who did two and a half albums, and then kind of like completely failed to deliver upon the promise. Instead, I'm going to be talking about a band that I love, that I think should be listened to and should be listened to and loved and remembered far more than they actually are. I'm talking about Hope of the States. Hope of the States are one of my very favourite bands. I had the good fortune to see them once in Brighton in December 2004. I could have seen them more. I really, really regret not seeing them more. It's in terms of bands that I could have, would have, should have seen, seeing Hope of the States more often is definitely one of the things that's on my list. Also, going to see Joy Division's last gig would have been quite nice, considering it only happened 6 miles away from where I was. But I was only 6 at the time, so I'd have had to have snuck in. And then, being 6 years old and probably obsessed with The Empire Strikes Back and Flash Gordon, I would have just gone, what is this racket? But that means I could tell you what, I saw Joy Division, and they were abominable because I hated every minute of it. In the same way that when I saw David Bowie, which was at Glastonbury in the year 2000, I'd been awake for something like 4.5 days, and I really just wanted to sit down and a cup of tea, no matter how good David Bowie is, and he was fantastic, by the way. I was really tired and I just wanted to sleep and have a cup of hot chocolate and a nice bath, which is probably no way to remember David Bowie live. We also were planning on seeing him at the Tea in the Park Festival in 2004, but he had a heart attack on stage at Prague, and then obviously the health incident at the Hurricane Festival, and never toured again. I don't quite know why I'm telling you this, because I should be talking about this band here. This band, Hope of the States. I'm going to have to run through some numbers here. So they did 2 albums, 7 singles. There are 18 bootleg recordings of the band, and they had an advance for £1 million, which is crazy when you think about how much £1 million is now, and of course it was worth more then. They were signed by, I think it's probably Sony Records. I can't remember the name of the record company. I probably should. Sony Music UK. They were signed by Sony Music for £1 million off the basis of a review on Teletext. And for those of you who are particularly old will remember that Teletext is kind of like a rich man's internet that ran through your television and delivered text in the 80s, 90s and early noughties, and it was finally switched off a few years ago. They had a review page called Planet Sound, where they talked about pop music, rock music, and demos. And then Hope of the State sent a demo to Planet Sound on Teletext, got a rave review, and then got signed, which is incredible. So this was before the days of MySpace, before the days of Lily Allen and whatever. This was a Teletext band, which it's only 17 years ago. It doesn't seem that long. It seems like a blink of an eye. Now, I think, as I've said before, this band are a band that were all things to me, because they're just the sound that they had, the lyrics that they had, the imagery, everything about them screamed a quality band that cared deeply about what it was doing. Sometimes you see bands and you kind of go, do you even like the band you're in, or are you doing this because it's a job? And then the other one is, do you care about the product which you're kind of charging people money for? And obviously, I talked in the worst live albums of all time recently about how Robbie Williams couldn't be bothered to go and see the film of his biggest headline show to 450,000 people before it was released and before it was put into the cinemas. He couldn't be bothered. Whereas obviously this band, blood, sweat, and tears went into this band, and everything that they did, they really, really meant. So I'm going to talk through Hope of the States from beginning to end on why I love them so much. This is probably quite niche. Most things I do is quite niche, but hopefully this will be something that you can watch and go, I'm going to give them a try. And if you like them, that's absolutely brilliant. And if you don't, it's one less band to worry about in the big scheme of things. So in 2003, the band kind of released their first single, and their first single was a very limited CD in a hand-stitched Hessian sleeve. And by hand-stitched, what I mean is this is it. This is Black Dollar Bills by Hope of the States, their first single, where a band member stitched this out of fabric and then put the CD in here. Now this is probably sells for about £10 now on Discogs. There was a time when it was selling for £100. I paid a little bit more than £10, but that was quite a while ago for it. And it contains 3 songs on it: Black Dollar Bills, Everything for Everyone, and Ickle. Now, Black Dollar Bills is a fantastic debut single. And what it does is it kind of encapsulates everything about Hope of the States that was brilliant in one song. So what do they sound like? I've been talking about them for 8 minutes. I haven't mentioned what they sound like. Well, they're a band that are influenced by Godspeed You Black Emperor, Mogwai, the Waterboys, the Libertines of all bands, and good old-fashioned classic British rock. So kind of like, built standing on the shoulders of and built upon the legacies of bands like Oasis. Now, I have a very strong opinion about a huge amount of anodyne, bland, beige, British flag-waving corporate guitar rock. The vast majority of it is unimaginative shit, in my opinion, and nothing will ever be able to change my opinion until they go back in time and make records that are better than the ones that they actually did at the time. I loathed 90% of Oasis's fans, for example. I loathed huge amounts of generic, bland, corporate, identikit, landfill indie rock that was all around in the 90s and the noughties and the 80s. But then 90% of music throughout every period of history has left me absolutely cold. Hope of the States managed to find that somehow, that vector, that middle point in between pretty much every different weird and unusual genre of band that I liked. So I loved huge instrumental dramatic tracks with huge post-rock leanings, Mogwai, This Will Destroy You, Explosions in the Sky, Godspeed, all those bands. Yep, they had this in spades. And at the same point, there was a huge amount of influence from bands like the Waterboys in Hope of the States. There were a 6-piece act, 2 guitarists, a fiddle player, bass, drums, multi-instrumentalists all the way through, huge roaring sounds, and they could go from a whisper to a scream, and from a tiniest sound to a crescendo very, very quickly, and build upon them. And it absolutely worked for me because it was adventurous and accessible at the same time. They weren't scared of choruses, they weren't scared of meaningful lyrics, but what they were scared of was being shit, and they didn't do it. They were, because they only made 2 albums and they only existed for 6 years. They didn't have the point where they turned rubbish. And to be honest, I don't think they ever would have had a point where they turned rubbish. But this is you know, one of the things that's both bitter and sweet about them is that they had such a fast time span and such a short existence that they went through all of the emotions and they managed to bypass the bit where they get old and rubbish. Sorry, it's been a long day and I'm trying to cut down on my caffeine intake, and it is late, of course. So the second single that came out after they had been signed to Sony Records was this. Now, this comes in a specialist heat-sensitive package. Now, I've not done this for a while, but if I left this out in the sun, the heat-sensitive sleeve would reveal to you a picture of a black and white photograph, I think. And Nehemiah, because they're always very good at making sure that you can't pronounce some of their best songs, is also on their debut album, The Lost Riots. This CD, and this is where the band started to lean into formatting a fair bit, actually. This is backed with the 70s song A Heart Can Stop a Bullet, and on the 7-inch This House Was Once a Home. Now, I can't really explain what this song sounds like. You're just going to have to trust me when I say it's fantastic. And if you like, and you've been listening to my previous videos, you'll know I have brilliant taste in music, and I'm, of course, extremely modest. But if you think about what was happening in the world at the time that this came out, which was, I think, 2003, 2004, what was in the charts was very, very different. There was almost like a second wave of British rock music that was coming up. So bands like Franz Ferdinand, the Libertines, other bands that were terrible. Normally starting with a K, like Kasabian, Keane, The Killers. All those bands were starting to be popular and successful at the time. There was almost like a second wave of new British rock that was coming through. Can't believe I said that. It sounds so much like I should be working for Q magazine when I described it as new British rock. But there was like this tide of music that was made basically by skinny, unhappy white boys, and some of it was awful because, as you know, second generation copycats aren't particularly good. And you can think that, for every Joy Division, there are 10 other bands that are nowhere near as good that clearly just listen to a lot of Joy Division records. For every Oasis, there were 10 or 20 bands that had listened to them that were coming around and that were doing generic meat and potatoes beige rock, and I'm thinking particularly about Shed 7 and Northern Uproar, and other kind of creative dwarfs who just weren't in any way inspired. They mistook, as Oscar Wilde said, saying something with having something to say. And Hope of the States were, for me, the band that stood out head and shoulders above all those other bands. So whilst everyone's going on about how fantastic the Arctic Monkeys are, and I've got 3 Arctic Monkeys CDs over there, or the Libertines, and I've got no Libertines CDs, that music generally left me cold. I tried with Arctic Monkeys, and I'm just like, I just no, it's all very very prosaic, very small. I think in the lyrical aspiration and vision around it, and sometimes the words were almost like punctuation or sonic texture, in much the same way that Def Leppard wrote songs around what they sounded like as opposed to what they meant. And what that meant was you end up with lyrics that are meaningless. And what is the point of making art if it's meaningless? Surely the thing about art is to communicate feelings and ideas and emotions and insights between human beings, and you've got this fantastic ability to do so, and yet somehow you're going to go and fill it with the lyrics to something like Pour Some Sugar on Me, which, by the way, sounds fantastic, but it's like love is like a bomb and I couldn't get it on, living like a lover with a redaphone, sometime, anytime, sugar me sweet, come on baby, don't sugar me, hey yeah, which is meaningless. Those words are gibberish. It's like somebody threw a paint gun filmed with cold alphabetic spaghetti at a wall covered in glue and said, now you sing this. And certainly for me, Hope of the States were a band that actually did lyrics that both you could read, understand, like, and were able to go, I'd never thought about that before. Whereas some of the other bands, their words were terrible. And obviously, as you've worked out, because I do talk like I'm paid by the words, words really, really matter to me in songs. And it's really upsetting when I listen to bands that I love and the words are terrible. So the third Hope of the State single is Enemies and Friends. And as I've kind of said before, you really, as you've seen with the heat sensitive sleeve on Nehemiah and the hand stitched Hessian sleeve for Black Dollar Bills, these didn't look like regular records. These didn't look like anything like that at all. These looked like that you somehow had access to secrets or mass produced kind of works of art in much the same way as that New Order records looked like you were seeing something that actually was could have hung in a gallery. These were, in terms of construction, presentation, these were interesting records that didn't look like just another 7-inch that had been pressed on a funny colour vinyl. Somebody given time and thought and attention to what these records looked like and the message that they included. Enemies and Friends was the last song I saw them play live. They closed their show at the Brighton Centre in 2004 with this. It is a song that stands head and shoulders above almost everything else released in the year 2004. It's just a beautiful, 2003, sorry, because it was just before I got into the band. It is a beautiful song with the refrain that I will carry with me throughout the rest of my life, which is, you keep your friends close and your enemies won't matter in the end. And that is true, because it doesn't matter who your enemies are, as long as you have friends, as long as you have people that are with you and supporting you all the way through. The cliche about keeping your enemies close, or more correctly, your friends close and your enemies closer, is bullshit. What matters is that we as human beings can live together as a tribe and pull in the same direction. Enemies and Friends is an anthem that, frankly, the British public didn't deserve and didn't buy when it came out. This 7-inch is backed with a song called Why Did I Let My Heart Come Last, which is so true. And it's certainly, when I got into the band in 2004, it was very, very clear to me that this was a band that I'd been hoping for quite some time. So there's a CD single of Enemies Friends that's backed with 101st Lament, Static in the Cities, and the video for Enemies and Friends as well. And if you look at it, it's kind of made out to be like a postcard. It's got a specially kind of applied Hope of the State sticker on there, and the designers managed to forget the barcode on the back. It's even got over it like a stamp, so that it looks like it's been printed, the sticker's been stuck on, and then it's been run through the machine, so it looks like it's been postmarked. It's just these little attention to detail that make you realise you're dealing with people that care, and dealing with people that care really, really matters. On the shows in 2003, some people were given these, which are hymn sheets. This is hymn 101, the lyrics to Enemies and Friends, which is numbered. I put this inside my sleeve for the debut album, and the lyric is just, come on people, keep your friends close, your enemies won't matter in the end. It's a lovely song. I love it to bits, and no amount of me verbosing about it will help. There was a promo CD of recordings for the album. This is number 71. It's watermarked, and it's on the express condition that ownership and title remains vested with the copyright owner, which may require delivery of this record at any time, which means at some point, in theory, somebody from the record company could contact me and go, I want this back. I really don't think they're going to do that somehow. If I am, I think that'd be the first time I've ever heard of it. And this was followed by the band's debut album, which was released in 2004, The Lost Riots. The Lost Riots is one of the best debut albums of all time. I adore this record. It's a record that gets better and better every time I hear it. It's got just classics all the way through, and it kind of like follows that cohesive whole. So I mentioned earlier the band, they're kind of like a mixture of the Waterboys and Mogwai and Godspeed You Black Emperor and bits of the Libertines, and yet somehow they're the best bits of all of them, and they're more than the sum of the parts. Now, tragedy hit the band during the recording of this album. Their guitarist died. I think it was suicide, and the band obviously were facing with a position where they've lost a friend and a bandmate, and they had to carry on. It's really, really tough, but they did it. And I don't really know how I can talk about that event in any meaningful fashion, to be honest. Apart from to say that the record is a fantastic album that, despite such an event, it betrays none of the circumstances that went around that at all. So this has got about 12 songs on it. I think the vinyl's quite rare now. I should probably look after it. It's almost definitely won't be repressed or reissued unless somehow a sudden attack of taste hits the world and everyone goes, here's a band that everyone should love. I think Hope of the States should be as big and as lauded and as popular as the Velvet Underground. I'm probably the only person in the world, apart from the members of the band, who thinks that, but I'm prepared to be in an army of one. This is a brilliant debut album. It's probably about £1 on CD, by the way, from Amazon, or maybe even 1 penny plus £1.26 postage and packing costs. If you feel like spending £1.27 on a fantastic album, go ahead and buy this on CD. It's almost definitely on Spotify and YouTube as well, so please, please, please invest an hour in this record. You may find something that you absolutely love in it. It's just, I am inarticulate talking about how good the record is. So there are a number of versions of that. So that's the vinyl version. Here's the standard CD edition from 2004. And even this, it feels like it's a nice weighty package. There's a fold-out sleeve here. And sometimes you look at it and you go, you guys really don't care, do you, about it? You've just slapped some text on and you couldn't give a toot about what it happens. But there's a poster here which is made up of unusual biological pictures with lyrics from the album, I think, stuck in it. And then there's a kind of like a fold-out sleeve. There's also a limited edition package which comes in a slightly different, not particularly accessible sleeve, which I'm going to talk about here. And this is the special edition of the Lost Riots. It's sealed. The only way you can get into it is to open it, and you take out the contents. Oh god, I'm doing unboxing videos now. Here's the CD in a card sleeve with "These Are the Lost Riots" on it, and then there is effectively a booklet which takes the lyrics and the imagery that's been on the previous parts of it, and then attaches them inside this very delicate, wonderfully put together, hand created thing that's been tied together. Sorry, I forgot the word for tying there. And every one of the panels has a lyric alongside a picture of apartment anatomy. And I just don't know how to describe it, really. It really feels like you're holding a mass-produced work of art when you hold this. Sometimes when you pick up a CD and you kind of think, well, no wonder people aren't going to buy CDs anymore, because if you look at, let's say, problem is I've got too many good records, haven't I? Let's go for something that's a bit obvious. You may be surprised to know this. I don't suppose you will be too much. Kylie's Body Language. By the way, I love Kylie, and I think she's great, and I don't care who thinks what about her. She's fantastic. But this, in a jewel case, it just doesn't look like it's made by anybody that particularly cares too much about it. It's just, here's a picture. On the front, normally there's a picture of Kylie, but I've changed the cover around. Here's a picture. Here's some copyright stuff on the back. Here's a plastic case. There's £10 from the Woolworths. Thank you very much. Please go away. Go and buy another album in a couple of years. You know, these don't feel like records that should be sold in places like supermarkets. They feel like records that should be sold in art museums. And this is kind of also proven with the promotional CD for the fourth and final single from the album. This is the red, the white, the black, and the blue. The promotional CDs came in two forms, one with the UK flag, one with an American flag, which had been burnt, cut, and stitched together by interns at the record label, and then sealed with a bobby pin here, I think is what they're called. But if looking at this and you kind of go, there's thought and there's care that's been put into even the physical appearance of the record to make it look like something that's worth buying, something that's worth owning. Now that's a promo, but the red, the white, the black, and the blue came in a number of formats. Well, that's a surprise, isn't it? But you know, even then, everyone was doing 7 inches. There was a gatefold 7-inch here of well, it isn't a gatefold actually. It's got a special sleeve where the sleeve's been kind of stamped out. So what you can see there is that it feels like you're holding something that's meaningful, that's got some worth and some inherent value in it, as opposed to just a record delivery system. The red, the white, the black, and the blue is a song about nationalism. I felt very uncomfortable about nationalism and around jingoism and around people with Union Jacks painted on their guitars. I've always felt that. I'm always going to feel that. You know, I always subscribe to the belief that the more that a country flies the flag, the less that it's got to fly the flag about, because it's demanding almost to be proud of being as opposed to having something to be proud of. You know, I'd much rather be proud to be British and have reasons for that, as opposed to being proud of being British just by virtue of geography or nationality. And the red, the white, the black, and the blue is one of the very few songs that really addresses that. Now, as is always the case, there's a couple of other formats. There's a CD single, which effectively is backed with the Last Picture Show. 2-track CD. I don't know why people do 2-track CDs, but there you are, they did. And then there's a 3-track CD, which is the equivalent of the 12-inch, which has got this, again, the special sleeve that's got the cutout on there. It's backed with the Last Picture Show and Angels Over Kilburn. I should point out, by the way, at this point the band have been very, very, very prolific. They've started a series called the Dust Rackets, and the Dust Rackets is a series of handmade CDRs that the band gave to fans who attended shows on their tour. The idea being is that those dust rackets weren't going to be uploaded on the internet for download. They were going to be distributed on CD in the old-fashioned CD trading circles. So if you wanted a copy of the Dust Rackets, you either had to get a CDR off somebody that had got a CDR off somebody that had got a CDR off the band, or you had to be one of the people that the band said, here's a CD, distribute it, but don't upload it. I think most of the Dust Racket sessions aren't online, but there were 5 in total, 4 EPs and an album called Fifth, which was the last one that they released. And those Dust Racket CDs, by the way, allowed them to indulge and explore their more experimental side. So it was almost like the flip side of the band, those big, long, 30-minute songs that went between spoken word and crescendos and ambient noises, real 100% kind of, post-rock type stuff. Very, very, very reminiscent of Godspeed, You Black Emperor, and some of the other bands of that ilk. Also, Dust Rackets was later turned into the name for an American-only EP, which was Black Dollar Bills, backed with Good Horse Hymn, the demo of Siskill, the Work Miser harmonies, and a video for Black Dollar Bills, which was being censored by MTV. This was released in America and Japan. It was called the Winter Dust Rackets. It was the last release from the album. Well, sort of the last release from the album, because on the 2004 shows, they also gave out this CD, which is called I think it's the Ark of the Enfants Terribles, which is the House of Terrible Children. And I've shown you this before in a very early episode, which is a kind of like a hand-stitched, handwritten cover, a huge fold-out sleeve here, and inside there is a CD, which is got an embossed cover on it, and it's got 5 tracks on there. Those 5 tracks are mostly, I think, non-album songs. I can't remember what they're called now. some vinyl-only tracks and some B-sides. Again, if you look carefully and are patient, you can probably find this for a few pounds online. I trust you, it is worth all of it. So it's backed with, it's got Sister Girl, again, Static in the Cities, The Work Miser Harmonies, Angels Over Kilburn, A Heart Can Stop a Bullet. So it's got 5 songs on there, and then you can kind of open it out into this, which is presumably designed to go and to be blue tacked onto the wall of your student digs or something similar. I have no idea. But again, this was a promotional CD that was given away at to people that went to see a few shows or went to see shows on the 2004 tour. This is, aside from the fact that the plastic is starting to show its age on the cover here, this is exactly as it was received on the night. I wasn't given this, I later bought this after the fact, because as I've said before, I only saw the band once, and it was not at a headline show, which is still a huge regret of mine. 2005 came, and I should point out, 2004, when I saw them, they mostly played new material. So the songs which I knew, the songs which I loved, they played, I think, 4 of them, and they played, I think, about 5 or 6 new songs. I distinctly remember is being in the Brighton Centre during the last song, and I suddenly had this moment of revelation, kind of like in the Blues Brothers, when the light comes down and it hits, I think, Elwood Blues, James Belushi, and he goes, "I've seen the light," and he rides up, and I was like, this band, I love this band, and I know I'm going to love this band, and I'm going to have to go and see them more often. And of course, as soon as I decided to do that, they played, I think, 6 live shows in 2005, so I didn't get much chance to go and see them. And the shows which they did play, I think they played 1 in London, and that had sold out before they even had played Brighton, so I didn't get a chance to see them again until 2006. And I'll talk about 2006 right now, because in 2006 the band finished writing and recording their second album and released their last EP, Blood Meridian EP here, which is was released in a commercial format as a 10-inch single, which is here. And I think this version, yeah, this one's still sealed. So in order to get into the 10-inch, you have to open it, and you have to open the flap here like an envelope. I haven't opened it, and I'm not going to open it because I don't need to. As a limited edition 10-inch single, which you could buy, which was only sold on tour and limited to 2,000 copies. There was also a CDR promo for it, which features the four tracks off the EP, which I bought instead. And it's got 3 extra B-sides, the name of which I've temporarily forgotten. I was released on the 3rd of April 2006 to tie in with a number of live shows. Now, this is a fabulous EP. I can't remember what's on it, but I remember listening to it, loving it, and really, really, really wishing that I was going to go and see the band. But I'm going to have a chance. I'll have a chance to see the band. I'll be all right, you know. They've just released their second album. They've got plenty of time to come. In fact, they're just about to release their next single, Sing It Out. And Sing It Out was I think, one of my favourite songs of theirs. Came as 2 7-inches, one inside a gatefold sleeve, and the one inside the gatefold sleeve here had a handy space to put in the second 7-inch single. So the second 7-inch single here's Sing It Out, backed with a wreck, and then on the other 7-inch we have Sing It Out and backed with Hum. Of course, I bought it because that's what I do. I buy records. And I thought, okay, I'm definitely going to have to go and get to see this band. But I was not the happiest I'd ever been in 2006. I was really struggling with some work and some not work things. I've recently become a parent. I was doing a lot of travelling for work. I was doing a lot of, just a lot of stuff. And it really felt like I was quite depressed, to be honest. And I didn't quite know if I was depressed because sometimes, depression doesn't announce itself to you. It's like a black hole. You only notice when you look at the sky and you go, there should be stars there, and you realise there aren't stars there. If you don't realise that there aren't stars there because there should be stars there, you're not necessarily going to realise your state of mind. And I just really, really struggled with being who I was, living in my body and having the life that I had. I wasn't particularly happy in the life that I had, and so I missed my chance to see Hope of the States in 2006 because the nearest place to me that they played was London, and I was like, I'll go and see them. Yeah, I'll see them, but I've got so much other stuff floating in my head. I can't go and see them, and I really regret that. But also, I mean, at that point, I'd stopped listening to happy music. So, for example, bands like Pet Shop Boys, Underworld, KLF, I wasn't listening to them. I was listening to really sad, miserable songs because that's how I felt. Um, I only really made an effort to go and see things which I really, really, absolutely had to go to. So, for example, I saw David Gilmour a couple of times that year because I was like, he's 60, he's going to stop touring. And obviously, in 2021, I think he may very well have stopped touring. So, Sing It Out, the second single, I just showed you the promo CD there. Also came on CD, by the way, was backed with Morning Ghosts and My Son the Crow. And there was also in these days they did remix singles and download exclusive songs which you couldn't get unless you bought a download. There are loads and loads of exclusive remixes of Sing It Out that were never commercially available except on downloads or on this CDR, which is a bunch of remixes. It has the Hugh Nicholson extended mix, which is really, really good. It's like an old-fashioned 12-inch version of the track. There was also a piano arrangement. You could buy the demo from one of the online stores. It became a real nightmare tracking down all this stuff, but I found it. Um, but luckily, you don't have to hope and strive to find all that stuff because their second album came out. Again, it's probably about 1 penny on Amazon plus postage and packaging. It's called Left. I love this album. This is one of my favourite albums of all time. I was heartbroken when the band split in 2006 because I never got to see these songs. And I got to hear probably about half of this album live at Brighton, but I didn't know the songs. It was the first time I'd heard those songs. So they probably played, Sing It Out, Blood Meridian, Bonfires, maybe This Is a Question, and I didn't know. And it's just this rich, wonderful album that manages to somehow sound like a cross between, Spiritualized, The Waterboys, Godspeed, Mogwai, all these great bands that are just, and somehow it's better than all of them stuck together. Sorry, guys, I love my music, and this is just one of the best albums that I've ever heard. And Left, even the title Left, if the band's come to an end, the band have left you, and that's where it is. It's a great title for an album. Left kind of indicates that it might almost be the last one, but also the politics on the album are quite left wing, but they're not in that kind of dull, boring vote for person X kind of way. There's lyrics in here which really, really spoke to me and have spoken to my inner teenager. Uh, Ones where it was like, the troubled little kids that were bullied in school, this is the only chance you're getting to stand up for the put upon, the worried and the anxious. Don't be scared to say they got it all wrong and made a big mistake. And there's other ones in here which just really, really kind of cut all the way through me. I'm just trying to think about. So the song Industry, it has the lyric which is, the factory cheats and the industry lies. Your daddy ain't got a job in the morning. Everyone gambles and everyone fucks over everyone else till all reason is lost. Everyone is stabbing their friends in the back, and my daddy ain't got a job in the morning. And it's kind of like this fierce indictment of work and betrayal, and the way that they say, oh, be a good worker, go and do the job, you'll be okay, and then they steal the pension from you, and by the time that you realise that you've been fucked and the deal is wrong, it's too late. You haven't got the power anymore. It's kind of like, if when you get old, and if you're in Spain or somewhere and you realise you've got to come back for the NHS, and they go, well, actually, you haven't been resident in the UK for a while, so you can't just come back and get the healthcare. Although obviously that was pre-EU, pre-Brexit. And the last 4 or 5 songs on this are just heartbreakingly sad. You know, just the lyrics are just really powerful, uplifting, defiant. That they'll fight the good fight. That they'll keep at it. You know, and even January. January is a song that was written after the band's guitarist had died. And he says, I want to be a kid again. I want to wash my eyes out. I want to mean everything I say and never be scared again. I refuse to be ashamed, no matter how many doomed attempts it takes to forget my history, all my mistakes, and everything that I waste. And then in forward direction, the penultimate song, the chorus is, I believe in love and I believe in hope and I believe in everything I've done, but I don't believe in you or anything you do. And, well, yeah, I mean, I felt like that. It's just a really brilliant album for me that I listen to. I listen to it pretty much weekly, even now, 15 years after the band split up. Now, the last single the band released was the title track, Left. I have to remember the last words of the last single the band released are, what you want, you're never going to get unless you are prepared to be alone. If you think you've got to have it all, you've got to be prepared to give it up. And I mean, certainly, now that sounds very much like kind of like adolescent sixth form poetry or whatever. But there's nothing wrong with sixth form poetry. Sometimes it's the best stuff in the world when you're idealistic and you're powerful and you're articulate, before the world gets you and starts to change you. And this record speaks to me deeply, and it still does now. And it's just one of the best albums I've ever heard, and I strongly recommend that you listen to it. If you're going to buy it, get the DVD version, which has the album in stereo on one side of a disc. On the other side, it's got a half-hour tour documentary called The 547.5 Day Journal, which is backed with an exclusive instrumental soundtrack of weird and unusual post-rocky type stuff by the band. Now we get on to the end, really, the last single, Left. Heartbreaking that the band split up. Really is. But Left came in a number of forms. Commercially, as I've mentioned before, the dreaded double 7-inch, which is backed with Silent in the Tower Blocks on one of the 7-inches, and a song called Minifigures on the other. And Minifigures, by the way, if you're not a Lego fan, minifigs are what they call those little Lego men. They're minifigures. We're nearly at the end of the band's existence. There's one more single, one more commercial release, the CD of Left, which is backed with Boxes for Particle and End. End being the last song that was released during their lifespan. They chose to split in August 2006, presumably because the album had only charted at, I think, number 50 or number 51. Hope of the States owed £1 million to the record company, and I think they felt they were never going to get that money back, and that they were never going to get a chance to carry on anymore. And I think perhaps they felt that they'd given it their all, and the light that burns 3 times as bright burns a third as long. So I think the band came to an end as a result of simply running out of fight. There's only so much fight that you can give. There's only so many kicks and how many slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune that you can take before you start to go, you know what, I'm fed up. And I've heard a couple of interviews with band members after the band have split. It's fairly clear there's not going to be a reunion, and I miss the band deeply. But let's not be sad about the fact that we miss them. Let's be happy about the fact that, in this day and age, we shared the planet at the same time as bands like this, or people like David Bowie or Kraftwerk or the Beatles or whoever. We had the opportunity to go and see the bands that we love played live, even if I didn't take those opportunities as fiercely as perhaps I should have done. There's a couple of extra things which happened after the band split up. They still wrote and recorded some demos. So in May 2006, they wrote and circulated a small number of demos. There is a song called A Million Marriages, which is one of the best songs I've ever heard, but never got a commercial release. So it's on YouTube. It's got a criminally small number of views, and I will put it up on there for you to be able to hear. And Simon and Samuel Holohay, continued after the band split to play together for a short while, and they released, or more correctly, they recorded an album under the name Dark Houses, and this was released on CD by the Lost Music Club about 5 years ago, about 10 years after it was recorded. It's an album that really sounds like a lost Hope of the States record, and it's well worth hearing. But I think perhaps it's not as commercially accessible as the other ones, but I'm glad that we've got it. Sam also continued with a couple of bands called the Northwestern, I think, and Racetrack Gospel, both of whom sadly failed to get much in the way of commercial traction or interest. So that brings us up to the end of my tales of Hope of the States. One of the greatest bands that I ever saw. I didn't see them enough. They didn't make enough records. They died before their time. I miss them dearly. And if you're looking for new music that's very old and probably quite cheap to get, that you haven't heard, please give these bands' albums a listen. Hopefully you will love them. But like me, you'll curse the fact that you won't be able to see them live. I've done this and I've changed it around so that I'm not constantly talking about the same old things. Next episode, I'm probably going to talk about a band that I've mentioned before. But in the meantime, be nice in the comments, look after yourself. I will catch up with you later, and hopefully we'll find out who the bent copper is in Line of Duty when I go downstairs. At which point I go, oh, I always knew it was H. Anyway, see you later. All right, bye.